All right, looks like we are started here. Good day, everyone, and welcome. My name is Shannon Smadella, and I'm your moderator for today. So before we begin, I wanted to acknowledge we're gathering from the unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations in British Columbia, as well as various parts of the world. And I know a lot of you are joining us here today from all over the world as well. So we are grateful to be here, and we are grateful to also have you here. So perhaps just let us know where you are joining from today. Drop your city, your sector, even your LinkedIn in the chat. We'd love to see who's in the room today. So before we get into the good stuff, I have a few important disclosures to share. So bear with me. This part is required, but it does matter. So we'd like to note that the views expressed during today's session are those of the speakers in their personal capacities and do not necessarily reflect the views of Clearmind Medicine. Certain statements made during this discussion may constitute forward-looking statements within the meaning of applicable securities laws. These statements are based on current expectations and assumptions and are subject to risks and uncertainties that could cause actual results to differ materially from those expressed or implied. Listeners are encouraged to review the company's filings with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission for a discussion of these and other risks. Additionally, nothing shared in this discussion should be interpreted as medical advice, legal advice, investment advice, or professional advice, or as an endorsement of any psychedelic substances, treatments, or products that are not approved or regulated by appropriate authorities. Any discussion of psychedelic compounds, therapies, or related research is for informational and educational purposes only. So here's what we're here to talk about today. Today's conversation goes behind the data on CMND-100, the first MEAI-based compound to enter human clinical trials. So you'll be hearing directly from the investigators running that study alongside the CEO of the company, Clearmind Medicine. And that's a rare combination and it matters. So we're happy to have you here today for that. So I will introduce our panel in a moment. But first, a few words from Dr. Adi Zuloff-Shani, who is the CEO of Clearmind Medicine. Dr. Adi Zuloff-Shani is a biomedical research and development executive with over 20 years of strategic and operational leadership in the healthcare industry. She holds a Ph.D. in human biology and has led regulatory R&D and clinical operations across a wide range of therapeutic areas. So welcome, Adi. Oh, we still have you muted there.
Yeah, sorry. So hello everyone and welcome to Inside MEI. We are deeply grateful to have two extraordinary researchers with us today, Dr. Jennifer Ellis from Johns Hopkins and Dr. Anahita Bassir from Yale, whose work on CMND-100 represent a genuinely historic milestone. This is the first MEI-based compound to enter human clinical trials, and today you're hearing directly from the investigators running the study. At Clearmind, we are driven by a clear mission to transform mental health and well-being through the development of novel psychedelic-derived therapeutics. MEI represents something we believe is truly differentiated, a non-hallucinogenic compound with a distinct mechanism of action being studied for one of the most widespread and underserved conditions in the world, alcohol use disorder. We're proud to be hosting this as a free and open event because we believe this science should be accessible to researchers, to clinicians, to investors, and to the people whose lives this work is ultimately meant to improve. Thank you all for being here. We hope you leave today with a clearer picture of where this science stands and where it's going to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Adi. So joining us today are the two investigators leading this trial. We have Dr. Anahita Bassir, MD. She is an addiction psychiatrist and assistant professor of psychiatry at the Yale School of Medicine. Her research focuses on developing novel treatments for addiction and stress-related disorders alongside investigating their underlying neurobiological mechanisms. Her work centers on cannabinoids and psychedelics. She leads clinical trials examining the therapeutic potential of psychedelics and other novel compounds for alcohol use disorder, depression, and PTSD. Dr. Bassir's work aims to bridge neuroscience and clinical care to inform more precise, biologically grounded interventions. We also have Dr. Jennifer Ellis. She's an assistant professor and licensed clinical psychologist at Johns Hopkins Medicine. Her research focuses on identifying new therapeutics for substance use disorders and optimizing substance use treatment for individuals who enter care with co-occurring conditions. Together with Dr. Adi Zuloff-Shani, they bring the full picture from the lab to the clinic to the boardroom. So let's get into it. We have some questions, and we are going to start off with one centered around really just learning about MEAI. So I'm going to leave this open to see who would like to jump in to answer it first. And the question is really, what have you learned about MEAI so far? What is the research revealed about how it works and really what it does?
Hello, and thank you for having me. Let's just start with what MEAI is. MEAI is a compound. The chemical structure of MEAI is similar to MDMA, but of course with some differences. And it affects some receptors in addition to neurotransmitters, and the result of all the combination of all this results in higher concentration of some neurotransmitters in synaptic densities. Main one is serotonin, and also some norepinephrine and some dopamine, but really we are talking about the effects of serotonin and how that can impact and the neurons and brain function in general. And but one big difference that MEAI has with MDMA and other psychedelics is that it does not induce the typical subjective experience that we have with other psychedelics. It has some subjective experience, but in different way and much less severe. And that's how it can be useful in research and in clinical practice because of this difference. So we know a lot about how it affects brain function, but of course, we don't know all the details. But one of the main indications that based on anecdotal reports we are interested in is effects of MEAI on drinking. I stop here. I'm sure we will talk more about that.
Just to mention, we've also tagged your article in the Eventbrite if people would like to go take a look at that as well. Dr. Ellis, did you have anything to add to that?
Not a ton. I think that's like a really, comprehensive summary of sort of what we know so far. I think maybe the only thing that I would add that I think is really interesting about MEAI is, how some of the preclinical work has sort of shown, some really kind of promising initial effects across, cocaine use, alcohol use, obesity and binge eating, which, kind of leads to a question of, is it sort of like how specific is the pathway that it's targeting, and is there sort of a broad effect on reward-based behaviors broadly? And so it'll be really interesting to sort of see how it winds up looking as the human trials progress.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, that actually is a really good segue into our next question. So MEAI is being described as a non-hallucinogenic psychedelic-derived compound. From a scientific standpoint, what may differentiate it? And Dr. Bassir, you already touched on this a little bit here, but what may differentiate it from classical psychedelics in terms of subjective efforts, study design, and potential clinical application? So in other words, how does it, compare to the other compounds in this space? What sets it apart?
I could take this one. And again, I think, Dr. Bassir really kind of hit on the sort of the big ticket aspects of this question. But, as she mentioned, it's not a compound that's known to produce sort of strong hallucinogenic effects, which makes it, I think, very different than, I think, some of the classical psychedelics where the treatment paradigm is that someone will receive, several sessions of psychotherapy, preparing them for a sort of strong subjective psychedelic experience, and then might continue to experience psychotherapy afterwards. I think something that produces a different effect profile might be integrated maybe potentially differently in different clinical settings. There might be the potential for different dosing strategies. And I think, right now we're in sort of the phase 1 part of the study of just kind of looking at what are sort of the subjective effects and the objective effects in the pharmacokinetic profile in healthy volunteers. And I think that will sort of inform, how this compound might be sort of best administered in different clinical settings.
If I may just want to add to that, and Dr. Ellis said it beautifully, but this difference, like not having the classic psychedelic subjective experience, is something that is so important now in the field, because there is really we are trying to understand the significance and contribution of subjective experience to the response to treatment. And there are a lot of also challenges in running clinical trials or treatment with psychedelics because of the subjective experience, because blinding is really so difficult. It's like we have long sessions of monitoring with two clinicians. We have to have the integration sessions, psychotherapy. So that's totally a different model. But if we can see treatment response with something like MEAI that doesn't have that experience, but still works on the same receptors and neurotransmitters, that can really differentiate. These are two very different models, and many of the challenges that we have with other psychedelics, we won't have with something like MEAI.
Great, thank you. And we briefly touched on volunteers. I was wondering if you can give us a little bit of an inside look at the recruitment process for MEAI for the clinical study.
For us, the recruitment is going smoothly, but you have to also consider that because this is the first in human study, and the chemical structure of MEAI is similar to other psychedelics like MDMA. We have to follow kind of close restrictions in terms of inclusion-exclusion criteria and monitoring, and everything that we have for other psychedelics, we also have it for MEAI. And that makes the recruitment a little more difficult because basically we want individuals who are super healthy, don't have any psychiatric symptoms. Of course, at this part, we are running healthy participants, but they should be medically, psychiatrically very healthy, and no other substance use or drug use. So that makes the recruitment a little more difficult compared to other studies. And when we go to the next phases of the study with individuals with alcohol use disorder, that could also, that's still there. But so far it's been going very well. I would say we had a very high rate of positive screening, not a lot of screen failures.
Yeah, we try to kind of cast sort of like a broad net through internet postings, radio advertisements, things like that. And, just trying to bring in people that are, as healthy as possible, and kind of for two reasons. The first is that this is sort of the first study that will sort of systematically evaluate MEAI in humans. And so we want to make sure that people are, medically stable, psychologically stable, and things like that. But it also, I think, it's helpful for the data as well, because will allow us to see kind of what is from the medication and through the dose escalation versus what is kind of noise due to individual variability. So people who participate in the study go through a pretty, rigorous screening process to make sure that they're safe to participate, and, to make sure that we're kind of cleanly separating out what the effects of the substance are.
Perfect, thank you. And that's also a great segue into what I wanted to talk about next with the dose escalation and the various cohorts. Without getting into specific details, can you walk us through what the clinical trial actually looks like? So you briefly touched on the patient profile, but the dosing escalation and what the experience is really like for the participants.
Yeah, so like I just mentioned, there's a pretty, structured screening process. As people come in, we again want to make sure that they're medically safe to participate and psychologically stable. So they do a pretty thorough mental health assessment and a medical assessment. And we take, labs, ECG, things like that. And right now we're just doing a single dosing day. So people are sort of monitored throughout the day. They're sort of asked to report on their mood. We sort of see how they're doing medically. They get evaluated by a physician sort of several times, and then they sort of stay overnight in a clinical research unit, and we see how they're doing the next morning. And then we kind of, follow up with them over the course of the next week to sort of see how they progress, even when the acute effects are no longer present. And we're still sort of partway through the study, so it'll be kind of interesting to see what the results sort of are once all the different dose cohorts have been have been done. But yes, so far it's been a really interesting experience.
If I just add something to that, it's interesting that many subjects are interested in running these studies. Like, these are healthy individuals, but they come to we do it in an inpatient unit, which is for psychiatric research, but still they stay overnight. There is a lot of things going on in terms of screening, collecting multiple blood samples, like very frequently, especially the first couple of hours, monitoring their symptoms. We have at least two monitors in the room for the duration of acute effects. What I saw is that subjects are very comfortable with this study, and they could tolerate the MEAI very well. We didn't have any serious or any severe adverse event. I'm looking forward to our next phase, which is individuals with alcohol use disorder.
Adi, is there anything that you wanted to add to that? Well, we still have you on mute there as well.
I'm on mute again, sorry. So I just wanted to start and say that we're really, we have 4 wonderful clinical sites who are very, very dedicated. And it's a very complex study, and there's a lot of steps to the study.
Oh, I think she is frozen. Let's give her
That's
a few.
because, yeah, I the camera off because otherwise the line here is not stable. So I'm sorry about that. Let me check.
Sure.
Yeah, I hope that now it will be more stable. So sorry for that. As I was starting to say, that this clinical study is very complex, and we have many, many steps and many doses and activities that need to be done during the study. And to add to the complexity, the participants, or the healthy volunteers, and also afterwards the alcoholics, which is the next population that we are going to examine under this study, they are hospitalized throughout the study. So for some of the parts, they are hospitalized for like 36 hours, and in some parts they will be hospitalized for 6 days or approximately. So it's very complex, and it's very it adds complexity to the enrollment. Also, in terms of the dosing, it's quite interesting how because it's a first in human, and you need to start from a dose, and you don't know which dose to start with and which dose will be safe enough, because of course the main interest, or the main thing in clinical trials throughout the development is that you keep the safe of the participants. So the way we decided with which dose to start the clinical trial, it goes by, we have tested MEI very rigorously on several animal models in preclinical settings, and then we found a dose that was safe. We didn't see any adverse events in this specific dose, and then you take 1/10 of this dose, and this is the dose that you start in the clinical trial. Then we suggested to FDA to double the dose with each step, and indeed they accepted this approach, and this is how the study is designed.
Great, thank you. And I think all three of you just answered my next question, but I'm going to touch on it anyway, just in case there's some information you wanted to add. And really the question was what this stage of the study is designed to help evaluate, and what types of observations are most important at this point in the clinical development process. And that kind of led to, perhaps the scalability of the study, or, the availability of MEAI, and then the different types of treatment models as well. So I know we've already touched on it, but if there's anything else you want to say about that, just let me know here.
Just to complete that, what we said, because this is the first in human study, first, of course, we had to evaluate the effects, the safety, not effects, the safety of one single dose of MEAI. And as Eddie mentioned, how to find that dose that is safe enough, like it's safe, but also we want to have the dose that may also have some clinical efficacy at next steps. So we started with a very low dose that was safe in animal studies, and then we increased the dose for 4 cohorts. So we increased the dose after we were sure like all subjects in the previous dose were safe and could tolerate the effects of MEAI. And then we tried 4 doses. And next step is to see if this one single dose is also safe in individuals who drink alcohol, because that could be different, right? Everything is about like from their metabolism, but also how that it affects their brain function. That could be different. So, but because this medication, or this compound, we think that it needs more than 1 dose in individuals to see the efficacy. Next step, the third step, is to see how is the safety of multiple doses of MEAI in first, of course, healthy individuals, but then last step is individuals with alcohol use disorder. And we'll see, but these are steps that the FDA approved to conduct this study. And in addition to safety, we also collect data on metabolism and pharmacokinetic, which is another important aspects of these studies.
Great, thank you. Anything else from Dr. Ellis or Dr. Zuloff-Shani on that?
Nothing from me. I think that's a very comprehensive answer. So
wonderful. So I have a little bit of a question to ask you here that might be a little bit of a fun question in terms of research perspective, but what was the most interesting or maybe unexpected finding so far in working with this compound or study design?
I think one thing that's been really interesting for me is sort of this open question about like what will sort of be the ultimate sort of best dose and best dosing paradigm that will sort of maximize the intention to reduce adverse effects and to while also sort of maximizing clinical efficacy. And, as we've mentioned so far, right now we're in the healthy volunteer stage. And so we're really just trying to understand, the pharmacokinetic profile, what the subjective and objective effects are. But that's just, with every participant, that's kind of a question in the back of my head of, as things move forward, as we're testing this in the next phase among people with alcohol use disorder, what is going to kind of be that midpoint? And I think, especially thinking how and working with some people with alcohol use disorder, how sometimes starting a medication can be, or one question that people might have is like, how is this going to make me feel? Is there any, are the effects going to, be aversive to me? And so just kind of thinking from that perspective, like what sorts of individual feedback we might get, I think has been an interesting open question. And as we sort of talk to individual participants and like meet them as they go through the study, has been one aspect of it that's really interesting to me, is just sort of seeing, as the dose sort of increases, what might ultimately be the best strategy.
And something that is interesting for me about this study is that, it doesn't happen that often that you start working with a compound from like really human, like basic animal research, bring it to first in human study, do all the safety, it's like really do all the logical steps of bringing a novel compound to clinic. So for me, it's very interesting because it's kind of like it doesn't have a lot of like, you really see all these logical steps being from like animal studies to first in human, then multiple doses, then go to next step. And this course is very interesting. And especially if we keep in mind the promise that may this compound bring to the world of clinical treatment for individuals with alcohol use disorder. And I really enjoy the design of the study and how we are moving forward.
Great, thank you. Adi, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I wanted to, as both Jennifer and Anahita mentioned, and I think it's very important for the development of the drug and how we as a pharmaceutical company or small biotech company looks at drug development. So we wanted to leverage this very distinguished quality of MEI, which is non-hallucinogenic compound that doesn't necessarily need psychotherapy or even to be adjunct to psychotherapy, which for us it allowed us to develop or design a treatment that will be more accessible. And if you take into consideration also the fact that MEI is a small molecule, it's a chemical molecule, it's very easy to manufacture, doesn't cost a lot. It really allows us to bring to the market something that will be accessible, that will not cost a lot, that patients will be able to access quite easily. And I have to say that for me as a CEO of a company that my desire in life is to bring effective and safe products to the market, also the ability to make something accessible and not very expensive, and also the way of administration. We design MEI as an oral administration, a pill that someone will take in the privacy of its own home. So everything together makes MEI a good potential treatment for alcoholism. I think that's all about to really develop something that it's, as I said, safe, effective, but also accessible.
Thank you for that, Adi. And I want to talk a little bit about the indication as well in terms of alcohol use disorder. So why does it matter that we continue developing new medications for alcohol use disorder? What exactly is the gap that compounds like MEAI are trying to fill?
Alcohol is one of the most commonly used substance in the world, and the most common substance use disorder. Many individuals with alcohol use disorder they don't receive any treatment for their disorder, and even if they seek treatment, we have few medications that are approved for treatment of alcohol use disorder, and basically two of them maybe can help a little bit with desire. One of them is mainly just to stop them from using disulfiram. And there is great need, like a lot of individuals who want to cut down on drinking or stop drinking. they have, so we use some other medications to treat some symptoms, help them go through that, or they need to go to detox to kind of like manage the withdrawal symptoms. Some of the individuals may have very severe withdrawal symptoms if they prefer to not go to inpatient detox, which sometimes is not accessible to everyone. And also we know alcohol use disorder is one of those substance use disorder that has significant impact on medical health. Altogether, if we could introduce new medications in treatment of alcohol use disorder, that could potentially address this unmet need that many individuals with alcohol use disorder face in their lives. There is a great interest in development of novel medications for treatment of alcohol use disorder. More recently, psychedelics also attracted a lot of attention. We have clinical trials now, for example, for psilocybin in treatment of alcohol use disorder. Of course, more studies are needed, but the need is there, unmet need is there, and with the promise of new medications, I think we are looking into maybe changing a lot of lives for people who are struggling with these disorders.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. And I would also add that I think alcohol use disorder is a very heterogeneous condition, and that two people can meet criteria for the same diagnosis for very different reasons, and their alcohol use may be driven by very different reasons. And so it's great that we have 3 existing medications that are FDA approved, but they may not necessarily work for everybody. And it's unlikely that there will be one medication that will treat alcohol use disorder in everybody. And so by sort of developing new medications, it gives people additional options and sort of broadens like the menu of options that a physician might consider if somebody is in treatment and maybe has not responded to other available treatment outcomes. And I think, there's also like a bit of an implementation gap as well. I think the medications that we do have that work well are not always used. And there's, of course, a lot of very complicated reasons for that. Sometimes it's at the clinical level. Sometimes it's difficult to get workflow set up in various clinics. And so I think by having, additional medications that might target different aspects of alcohol use disorder and in general, just better implementation, it'll be something that hopefully will improve over time. But I think that first step is just giving people a broader range of options that might target different aspects of AUD.
Thank you. Adi, anything you'd like to add there?
Yeah, just that people will understand what we mean by to give more options to patients who suffer from alcoholism. Until now, FDA has approved only 3 pharmacological treatments for alcoholism. 4 if you take there's one treatment that is the difference that there's the first candidate was a pill, and now it's an injection. So I see it as a one treatment, but so not only that there's an unmet need, the opportunity here at Clearmind that we saw is that from one hand is the unmet need, and that there are not enough options, and even the options that are out there, they are not very effective. But we were able to combine this unmet need with testimonials that we had for MEI. So one of the advantages in the space, in the psychedelic space, is that you don't, unlike traditional pharmacy, you don't start from scratch. You don't really start from scratch. You have some. Usually you will have some people who have used the compound that you are developing recreationally, and sometimes you will have this testimonial. So you're not starting from with, usually traditional, what I mean by traditional pharma is that you recognize a problem, you design a treatment, you go from petri dishes to animals and finally to humans. in this space, it's kind of reverse engineering, if you will. You start from testimonials, and with MEI, it's not an exception. We had testimonials from like 100 people who have used MEI recreationally, who said that once they took MEI, they didn't feel the craving to drink alcohol. And they said that them not wanting to drink alcohol didn't have anything to do with, some decision that they had to make. No, they just felt satiated. They felt they are good. They didn't need anything. So we are really optimistic, and this is how we started our path towards the clinical trials. But we are very optimistic and we have very positive anecdotal data showing that MEI really has the potential to be a safe and effective treatment for alcohol use disorder.
Perfect. Thanks for adding that, Adi. That's a really good point there. I want to touch now on some of the broader implications. So looking ahead, what do researchers think about the broader scientific potential of compounds like MEAI beyond alcohol use disorder? So while still recognizing that those applications require further study, what is thought about the broader potential? And I'll leave that open to anyone.
Yeah, no, I think, I mean, one question that like I've sort of wondered about is, for other, conditions that are driven by, reward processing, potentially other, substance use disorders where there's sort of promising like preclinical data, I think could be interesting. Next questions, if there's promising effects in alcohol use disorder. So for example, extending on some of the preclinical models that have looked at cocaine administration and, binge eating, metabolic type behaviors, I think could be interesting. I think maybe another additional question or scientific question that would be interesting to answer in the future is, among people who have alcohol use disorder who might be more clinically complex, like how MEAI may perform in that particular patient population. I think the initial, again, trials will be recruiting patients with alcohol use disorder that meet certain inclusion-exclusion criteria to sort of maximize safety. But I think once and if, because it hasn't happened yet, but once and if there is demonstrated safety among people with alcohol use disorder and if there is a preliminary signal of efficacy, I think looking at that the broader population, including people that might be more medically or clinically complex, could be an interesting next question.
To answer this question, I'd like to first talk about how we think about psychedelics in general. We see now that classic psychedelics and also MDMA are being investigated for different psychiatric disorders, substance use disorders, including alcohol use disorder, but also trauma-related disorders like PTSD or mood disorders like depression. So one may think, how come one compound can treat both alcoholism and also depression and PTSD? So how is that even possible? And from there, I think what might be really the case is that psychedelics change something. So it could be it could be neuroplasticity, as some evidence shows that, but it could also be some other changes, for example, in mood or how you perceive world or like social information processing or so we have to find those like mediators. But it seems that psychedelics change something that results in improvement of psychiatric disorders. And I think the same can go potentially for MEAI. Of course, we need to study that, but I can think of if MEAI is first, we see that it's safe, but also it's effective for treatment of alcohol use disorder. I can think of other psychiatric disorders that can benefit from something like MEAI, especially like other substance use disorders, because we know there is one component, like common path or common underlying mechanism for all substance use disorders, and maybe MEAI is targeting that. I'm really interested in the future mechanistic studies to know more about how MEAI affects brain functioning.
Wonderful. And that was actually one of the questions we had come in from the registrations was regarding the mechanism of action. So I would think a lot of people are excited to eventually learn about that as well.
Just may mention something. So we a couple of months ago, I don't remember now when it was, but we published a paper, a review paper comparing the mechanistic qualities of MEAI compared to MDMA and other classic psychedelics. And I think that's a good review of the really like details of like how MEAI affects receptors and neurotransmitters compared to other psychedelics.
Wonderful. And I think we did link that in the Eventbrite, but we'll see if we can even maybe drop it in the chat here as well for everyone to take a look. And just a reminder that we will be going to a Q&A in about shortly here. So if you do have any questions or if there are any questions from the audience, I see we have a few coming in the Q&A. Feel free to drop those questions in there. We will get to them when we do get to the Q&A here. Adi, was there anything that you wanted to add on that most recent question regarding the broader scientific potential?
Yeah, so in the pipeline, we have other addictions and other mental disorders that we may pursue. We have cocaine addiction, which we have some very positive preclinical studies. We also looking at depression, metabolic disorders, and weight loss. So the list is quite broad. And hopefully we'll have some news coming about that in the short term.
Great. I have one last question before we go to the Q&A here. So the question is, as leaders in this field, what do you believe is most misunderstood right now about next generation compounds, including non-hallucinogenic and psychedelic-derived therapeutics?
So I don't know if misunderstood, but I want to go back to the difference between MEAI and other psychedelics, and that's the subjective experience. And many believe that the subjective experience or the transformative subjective experience is crucial to the therapeutic effects of psychedelics. So when we are talking about MEAI, that kind of like affects the same system, serotonin system, and similar impact on biology, but doesn't have that specific psychedelic experience because it doesn't, it's not like a potent agonist of 5-HT2A receptor. So maybe it just comes to mind that if it doesn't have that 5-HT2A receptor agonism and that subjective experience, maybe it's not helpful. It's not gonna have the same efficacy in treatment of alcohol use disorder or other psychiatric disorders. But I think that's exactly why we are interested in MEAI, because if that we do have evidence from other like animal studies with other psychedelics that maybe the therapeutic effects is not dependent on the subject's experience. And that's the significance and importance of the studies on compounds like MEAI exactly relates to that. Because if we see that the changes in neurobiology, how MEAI affects serotonin and other receptors, if we see that that results to improvement of symptoms like alcohol use disorder, then that can potentially change how we think about psychedelics in general. And I think that's why the importance of these compounds are even more, like it's more than just MEAI, it's really, it can change how we think about psychedelics. And I just wanted to mention briefly about why it's that important, because with MEAI, you can have maybe the same changes in neurotransmitters and brain functioning with a pill or a capsule that you can take every day. You don't feel, it's like many other capsules or medications that you take. You don't feel the strong effects. You don't need to go like inpatient, stay there for 8 hours, like really intensive treatment that we need for other psychedelics. So don't get me wrong, I'm very interested in what psychedelics are bringing to the field, but it's not feasible for many people who that would suffer from alcohol use disorder or other disorders, who that they cannot really go through all of that intensive treatment. So I just wanted to mention this one more time and emphasize on the significance of this study.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think the only sort of small thing that I would add is I guess also underscoring the point that was just made, that like psychedelic and psychedelic derived compounds are not all the same. They're very variable in terms of, subjective effects, safety profile, the treatment model, things like that. And I think just in general, one thing that I think is a common misunderstanding about psychedelics is I think sometimes people will swing between either hype or dismissal, where some people get so excited about these compounds because there are really sort of powerful, like anecdotal experiences. And then sometimes people, I think, dismiss too soon or have like misunderstandings. And I think studies like this are so important because they kind of clearly and like scientifically sort of answer the question of what is the clinical efficacy, what are the subjective effects, what are the trade-offs, which is, I think, what should be kind of guiding these decisions.
Thank you, Andy. Anything to add there?
No, I think that both Jennifer and Anahita did a wonderful job summarizing this question.
Wonderful. Well, we do have a few questions here in the Q&A, and I see some coming in the chat as well. We have one here from Christopher that says, is there any concern for, I believe that should be cardiotoxicity in comparison to MDMA? So
We didn't, I'm sorry. Actually, I will let investigators speak before me, so because they have treated participants, so they know it from first hand.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, so we do get ECG throughout the study. So there's ECG done at screening, 3 hours post-dosing the next day, and at a follow-up visit. So it's something that is paid like very close attention to over the course of the study. And yeah, I mean, thus far, anecdotally, just speaking for my site, that hasn't been something that we've experienced at the doses tested so far, but it's something that's been being carefully kind of evaluated and examined.
Just want to add something in terms of mechanism, because MEAI has lower affinity to 5-HT2B, which is one of the main receptors that we are concerned about other psychedelics in terms of their cardiovascular side effects. We expect a safer side effect profile.
Great, thank you.
And I just want to add, sorry, I just want to add that we received the same impression from the other sides who conduct the study.
Great. We also have a question here from Ruben, and the question is, are we going for one indication? Are you going for one indication and progress, or is the focus on multiple indications? So we know the studies on alcohol use disorder, so maybe Adi, you can add to this as well if
Yeah, we will probably go to additional indications. Of course, metabolic disorder and weight loss is quite high in where the company goes to, and other indications really depends on where we are financially. So. But yeah, we intend to go for additional indications, but not so many.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. And there's a question in regards to capital. So if you'd like to answer this one, you can as well. Are you going to need to raise capital in the short term?
No, so we are just about to Let me think when. We're just about to release our financial statement because we're a Canadian company. It's going to be Q3. Yeah, Q3. No, it's going to be Q3, sorry. So our financial standpoint is very good. We have enough money to finish this clinical trial, so we don't need to raise money in the short term.
Perfect. And we just had one question here in regards to specific milestones and whatnot. So Dan is wondering if you can share what specific milestones throughout this journey or achievements or catalysts do you believe can help increase shareholder value over the coming years?
So we have a lot of milestones, and I believe because clinical trial is such a complicated mission, I would say, there's lots of milestones that we can share with the public, because there's always sometimes you can share something because the study is double-blind, placebo-controlled, or something of that nature. But first of all, we are still in the clinical study has two parts, phase 1 and 2A, under the same protocol, under the same IND. The first part is an open label, so we constantly sharing with the public milestones from the study, and we'll continue to do so. So lots of milestones coming up, and also we have a very extensive IP portfolio, so we have a lot of announcement around the IP. So yes, we have a lot of milestones to share and potentially increase the value of the share for the shareholders.
Wonderful, thank you. And there's I guess a comment here, perhaps not a question, for Dr. Bassir from Ezekiel. So if you we can also send that to your email as well. Just something he's recommending.
I can briefly respond. It's just I totally agree. But the point is that we don't know how MEAI really affects those brain parts. There is a short-term effect and long-term effect. And short-term, of course, is just for the amount, like when you are under the influence of the compound, or maybe the day after or a few days after. But what really is important in treatment is long-term effects. And more studies are really needed to understand the long-term effects of classic psychedelics and also MEAI. And that's one of my interests.
Perfect, thank you. And when do you predict to finish the clinical trial? What is the timeline moving forward?
That's a very good question, which I will not fall into. Looking at how the clinical trial has been progress until now, I'm very optimistic, because it took us really a very short time to complete and we're just completing the first part A of the study. So I hope that we will continue in this path, in this space, and it won't be very long. But I will not make any statements in terms of concrete numbers.
Wonderful. Well, in the sake of finishing on time, and before we wrap up here, I just wanted to see if there was anything that Dr. Ellis or Dr. Bassir would like to leave the audience with today. Any final comments?
I guess my main final comment was, thanks for the opportunity to join this panel. I enjoyed the conversation, and I'm very interested to see kind of where the field kind of winds up going with regard to MEAI. So just thanks for the opportunity to be here today.
Yeah, I just also wanted to thank you and all the participants. We are in the beginning of a long journey, I believe, and it's just I'm so really it's my honor to be a part of this journey, and thank you so much.
And I want to thank both Anahita and Jennifer for accepting our invitation and for willing to participate in this webinar. I really, really appreciate it. And I want to thank everyone who participated today. We are always super excited to see the interest in our clinical progress, and we hope you will continue to follow and support us.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. And I'll just follow that up and echo that as well. And thank you both to Dr. Jennifer Ellis and Dr. Anahita Bassir, and of course, Dr. Adi Zuloff-Shani for your time and your willingness to share this work openly with our audience today. And of course, thank you to the audience for attending and coming to learn about this this study, first of its kind, and of course the early data from the first human clinical trial of the MEAI-based compound presented by these investigators today and running in their work. So if you'd like to stay connected and keep following this story, you can follow Clearmind Medicine on clearmindmedicine.com and of course on all social media. The replay for this webinar will be available in the coming days. So watch your email for that, share it with your colleagues or anyone tracking the Addition Therapeutics space. And if you have any questions that didn't get answered today, reach out. We'd love to keep the conversation going. So on behalf of the Clearmind team, thank you for being here. The science matters, and so does your interest in it. So thank you.